average age of someone's first Botox injection is now down to 26.
Oh,
yes.
are
So,
you kidding?
Yeah,
I think they're
right.
thinking about it. The sooner they can convince you to hate your body, the more money they can make, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
so true. Women, we ride at dawn. We have got to get rid of this. Is ridiculous. Welcome to It Gets Late Early. I am so excited about my guests today. They are the duo behind the Kimmel Windows exhibition in the middle of New York City called What About Age? An art installation that's all about educating the public on ageism. So I have Stacey Gordon, who is a senior fellow at the NYU Center for Health and Aging Innovation, as well as author and illustrator Aubrey Hirsch, who has a Substack and a forthcoming book called Graphic Rage, and we'll get into why that's the best name ever soon. So welcome to both of you. I couldn't be happier to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
All right, so I have had the pleasure of experiencing this exhibit in person, and I would like my socks were blown off. Like it was exceptional. It was just brilliant in every way. So obviously I'm a huge fan of this exhibit, but for those who have not experienced it yet, can you tell people what this is all about?
Yes, the Kimmel Windows What About Age exhibit is basically a public service announcement about ageism. We wanted to educate people in the community, in the NYU community and in the community of New York City about ageism. So we have these 13 windows that explain how ageism functions across our lifetime. So we have windows about healthcare, about work, about the media, about ageism and technology, about women's work in particular, about menopause, about structural ageism and how to end ageism, our call to action.
I love that. Love a call to action. How did it come about that you were able to get something that educates people about ageism in society and the workplace in the middle of New York City?
So the project came about in my role as program director for adult caregiving and retirement at NYU WorkLife. And the WorkLife office provides forward-thinking interventions to help integrate work and life. And also, as a result of my work with the Wrinkle Project, which is a community initiative that I brought to NYU to address and end ageism in all sort of parts of society. And I envisioned a sort of public service announcement, which we would, sort of broadcast across campus, and I happened upon the space that our exhibit is in, called the Kimmel Windows, when I first started at WorkLife, and met the exhibit director and curator, the head director and curator, whose name is Pamela Tinnen. She did some amazing exhibits, and at some point she had an exhibit on the Spanish Civil War, and there were these two words, end fascism, in one of the windows. And I was totally for that, and then thought, yes, and we have to end ageism and racism and sexism and all of the isms. Exactly. And I got in touch with Pamela and worked through Pamela and some other channels to get permission to create an exhibit around ageism.
It's so
and
awesome.
We brought, So we brought Aubrey in after doing a Google search, basically, of cartoons. We were interested in bringing in like a graphic novel approach. We thought we really wanted something that was that would speak to students and faculty and people in the neighborhood walking along the street. And when we found Aubrey, we knew immediately that she was our artist. So we got in touch, and Aubrey agreed to do this project with us. And Aubrey, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, I was just really excited to be on board when I first heard about the project. It's totally in my wheelhouse. I do feminist comics about like social justice issues, and I had written about a few things about aging. When I turned 40, I had written a comic about the idea of like a woman's expiration date. You know, like now that I'm a monster because I'm 40, this is how I'm feeling about life. Yeah.
Welcome aboard.
So it's definitely something I was excited to be a part of. Right,
Rage,
exactly.
graphic
Yep.
rage, right? Yeah. Why it's so perfect. So perfect. And yeah, I'd actually seen your work prior to coming upon it at the Kimmel windows and 100% agree. Chef's kiss for the selection of Aubrey for this particular
Yes.
installation. Absolutely nailed it. And I think what is part of the reason I found this so cool is that it was embedded on a college campus. And let me tell you, when I was in college, the last thing I thought about was getting older. Like it was not
Right.
even at all in my mind. And so you're bringing this very real societal issue that is the elephant in the room all the time, right? It's like this is something that is just under the surface of society and yet gets little to no airtime. So to see it at this incredible university in the middle of New York City, spoken about in such a relatable and just blunt way with these pictures that, you know, exactly showed how all this was going on. It was like absolutely nailing it. So just incredible work. And I was so heartened by it. I can't even begin to tell you. And I posted about it and it went crazy on LinkedIn, which was so exciting to me because it underscored also that people are ready to have this conversation. It is overdue and we can't have it in a real way without these sorts of PSAs. And I'm absolutely thrilled about it. And I applaud you so much for taking this on and for NYU for
Thank
putting
you.
it out there. So congrats, you guys. Like really amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
So
yeah.
Take us through a little bit more about the installation itself, because for those who haven't seen it, it was like, what was it, 1.5 city blocks long? Like that was a lot of content. There were a lot of different murals about all the different sort of intersections with age and explaining what, frankly, ageism is, because a lot of people don't even know what it is. Perhaps they've never heard it before. So tell us a little bit about those specific murals and how you came across the various ways in which you were going to give that information to people.
A lot of my work, the work that I was doing in my role as program director at WorkLife was helping people figure out how to deal with the issues that they were having in their life at any one, given time. I always sort of looked a little bit more deeply at what the larger issues, the sort of social and structural issues are, and for people, and try to really think about how one person's issue was one person's issue, but it was very much related. It is very much related to all of the other people who are dealing with the same issues. So, for example, we have a window on caregiving, let's say on women's work and caregiving. And a lot of the people who came to me for consultations or who attended the programs that I ran were, dealing with the sort of down, nitty gritty, down and dirty issues around hiring caregivers, maintaining caregivers, and figuring out how to handle or how to balance their work and their life when they have an older loved one or a younger person in their life that they also needed help for.
Or both. Sandwich.
Yes, exactly. So what that is sort of a systemic issue. And so we started this exhibit with a structure with which Aubrey helped us build, but to represent structural ageism, to communicate the point that ageism is not just ageism. It's part of a larger social structure that is comprised of sort of the laws and policies, the macro level issues, the communal institutions like healthcare, the workplace, the actual communities in which we're situated. That's the meso level. And then the micro level, which is sort of our interpersonal interactions, what we feel inside ourselves about our own aging, how we talk about aging between, with friends. And so we started with the creation of the structure of ageism, which, we went back and forth. I think it sort of looks like, I wanted it to look sort of like Soldier Field in Chicago. And I think it sort of does, or like a big circus tent of like ageism, which Soldier Field sort of looks like circusy, right? So, Aubrey, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say it was just a lot of process. Like the most difficult part of the process probably was editing, because there's so much about this, and it is pervasive, it's intersectional, it impacts society at every level, us at every level, it's internalized, it's like socially acceptable in a way that some other isms aren't at this point. But you can make an aging joke in a way that you can't really make a racist joke, for example. And also, it's a thing that will affect everyone. It's like the only ism that is going to apply to everyone at some point. So that was the biggest challenge, was like, not so much like how are we going to fill these 14 windows, but like how are we going to make it so we're only producing 14 windows worth of material.
So fair. So fair. And you really nailed it. I feel like it was very well encapsulated in the variety of different ways in which you looked at it from an intersectional or societal perspective. And I just found it tremendously helpful. And I saw people, as I was standing there looking at them, I mean, so many people stopped, looked, and contemplated this. It was really, really cool to see. And as someone who focuses on this a lot, I feel sometimes like I'm screaming into the void. And when I was there, I was like feeling the warm and fuzzies, because I was like, oh, look, people are getting it. People are caring about this. And it was extraordinary to see that. I really loved it.
We love to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
Yeah, it is. I live around the corner from the windows, and every once in a while I'll just go and sort of like stand on the corner and watch people stop and take pictures. And it's incredible to see how people are really, sort of really thinking about ageism. And I think in very new ways. I also have a student at NYU, and she said that the NYU students can actually see the windows from the library across the street. And she said that she can see kids like standing in the windows, like at the standing in the library windows, staring down into the exhibit. I'm like, can't get better than that.
That is so cool. Yeah. And in general, have you heard specific sort of responses to this, and has it varied by age even, right? Like the students who probably skew largely younger. I think the average age of the college graduate in the United States is something like 24 or something around there. Or have you heard from, other passersby? Like, what has the response been?
Although interesting, I'll just interject, I think the average age of someone's first Botox injection is now down to 26.
Are you kidding?
Yeah,
I think they're thinking about it,
Holy.
They are thinking about it.
Oh my, that was the farthest thing from my mind back in college. That's tragic that we're there. Yeah. I mean,
sad.
Wow. That's how much work we have to do. I mean, I guess they're like 10-year-old, 11-year-olds going to Sephora trying to get face masks and stuff. So, I mean, it's start them young, I guess.
Oh,
Beauty industrial complex.
Add water.
Right? Like, just add water.
Right.
Like, have you seen an 8-year-old? Like, are you kidding me? It's
I heard
wild.
a story on NPR about the 8-year-olds wanting to have skin like a baby.
Oh my God.
Young girl was
so
interviewing,
depressing.
my baby skin, I miss it.
Oh my gosh.
The sooner they can convince you to hate your body, the more money they can make, right?
Exactly. That's so true. Women, we ride at dawn. We have got to get rid of this. Is ridiculous. Like, I cannot believe that this is infiltrating even the minds of 8-year-olds. That's deeply disturbing. But again, that is exactly why this sort of a project is important. We need to get the word out. And I think we have to come up with ways to do that are a little out of the box, because I think the typical, like, don't be ageist, ageism is wrong thing is not really working.
Right,
and so we need to think of new innovative ways to do it. And so that's why I think this, again, is just so brilliant. So that's fascinating, the 26-year-old Botox thing. Wow, that's stunning. And now there's Brotox too. Like, a lot of guys in Silicon Valley are like, I need to get some of that so I can keep a job or get a job, which is also depressing. But anyway.
Right. Well, we do have a window that's called Ageism Through the Ages, and it's actually featuring a boy, a young boy who's age 3, seeing cartoons of an old crone or a witch or whatever Disney shows. Disney portrays as an older woman. And then he's protesting in his college, and the older person is telling him, hey, son, don't believe everything that you hear. And then he goes, and then he realizes as he's brushing his hair one day, this is Aubrey's brilliant idea, that he's losing his hair, and he starts freaking out, right? And he's growing older, and what happens next is that he goes to a job interview, and he is considering, the guy next to him saying, I probably won't get this job because he's younger than me, and he's getting really worried. And then he is in his bed at the end of his life, sort of with his, with all of the different sort of stereotypes of age that are in thought bubbles, sort of piling up on him. And that's the internalized ageism that he's sort of gotten throughout his life. So we know that ageism affects men as well as women. And,
Sure
I think oftentimes, men don't experience ageism until much later in life. And so we did have actually the majority of windows that are focused on women and women's issues in particular, but young as well, ageism towards young people as well as towards older people.
Well, I love that. And I think really crystallizing the message using a man as the protagonist was so brilliant, because again, like, we think of this as something that impacts women, and certainly it does. And I would argue that it impacts us more than it does men in general, at least for a longer period, right?
For sure. No argument there.
Yeah, exactly.
But the broader we can make our coalition, right? Like, let's get the men in here fighting ageism with us.
Yeah.
Because it literally impacts all of us. And so I think that the fact that you centered that particular narrative around a man was so brilliant and so key and so clutch. And I think it probably really underscored and awakened people. Oh gosh, like this, specifically men, right? And I think, from my own experience, having done the show, I think the people who are most taken aback by ageism are men. They're not expecting it. They're not, and even when I did a survey prior to launching the podcast, the people who were least worried about ageism were men. And guess what? It's coming for you too. And that it's going to be a shocker, right? So it's the first ism, especially for white guys. It's like, welcome aboard. This is how it is. But it's a heartbreaking issue. And I think it's very frequently dismissed. I mean, I've had people who have said to me point blank, like, why are you making up another term? Like, there's no such thing as ageism. It's not real. I hear that more often than I would like. And so I think I want to send them like a one-way ticket to NYU Kimmel Windows and be like, hey, check this out. Because it's just like, no, this is legit. And it has, you spoke to this. It has such wide reverberations beyond the person it's impacting, right? Like, there are people who lose their jobs and can't provide for their families. And then that bleeds out into the impact in the community and their everything. It really, you can't take this out of society because it bleeds into everything, right? And that's, again, why I think this is such an important topic.
I wish I felt like that. Like, ageism isn't a real thing. That sounds like a nice way to go through
it. It feels like a luxury, right? Yeah, right.
It is interesting how it differs per industry, though. And that's one thing that I've observed. In some industries, the ageism is really leveled at younger people. I imagine in academia, that might be the case, Stacey, where people might prefer someone who's a tenured professor, for example, and ascribe more meaning and value to that person's experience. Whereas in tech, despite, older people actually having created the very tech that we use today, they're looked down on for being old and experienced. So it's interesting how it changes.
Yeah, you'd be surprised, though, in academia, there's a lot of talk about getting new blood in the department,
that term is
refreshing people's, sort of sense of the topic, getting a new view. But older faculty members are definitely, they're revered, not necessarily, they're respected and revered, but sort of placed on a pedestal often, told that they can't perform as well in the classroom, and there's, to all age stereotypes we know have some sort of grain of truth, right? So there is some grain of truth to, for example, an older person teaching a topic that's very sort of, that's a new type of knowledge that's being developed. Let's say a science that is, that's being pushed forward, and all these young students have like a different perspective, like, and so that's okay. And what we need to do is make it okay for people to have different experiences, of people of different ages to have different experiences of a topic, and to connect around that. Because people will have their stereotypes. It's what happens that's so dangerous for people is when they sort of sit in their own corners or silos and don't talk about how the changes have affected, let's say, the field, or how those changes affect the ways that people discuss a certain topic or talk to one another about, knowledge building, knowledge creation. So, we're all a work in progress, and there are differences. We do change and develop as we grow older, and but the goal is really to keep talking, to not sort of do an us versus them
Totally.
sort of,
Which we're so
play.
bad at in this society. That's
We
for
are.
sure.
We really are. We really are.
And it's been done for millennia when it comes to generational warfare. It's so bizarre.
Yes.
Like, why do we do
Yes.
this? We're just born in different years. It's so absurd. But yeah, it's a big thing. And I think the value is, of course, like you said and intimated there, it's like having the intergenerational collaboration and people with different perspectives who have different norms that they grew up with, right? That's all really important. And, the best teams actually draw upon people from various experience levels. But so I'm very sad to hear that at some point this exhibition will move. But I want to know, is this the end for this installation? What's going on next?
This is not the end.
Yes.
On March, I think 18th, the exhibit will come down. And there's another exhibit that will go into the windows. And we have a bunch of plans for the exhibit. One is we plan to do a study of the windows of students and older people in the community's exposure to the windows. We're going to be doing a randomized controlled trial that will take place this fall. The windows are actually hopefully traveling to several other universities where they will be installed or put in these very funky sort of light boxes and be able to travel to these universities. We were also invited to bring the windows to a couple of different professional conferences. And there's actually a town somewhere that I can't mention that has actually invited us to bring the windows and install them in their town, and then do a study of that town and their response to the windows.
I love it.
We were also asked to bring them to a museum. Aubrey, I haven't told you about this yet, but
yeah, this
we'll talk more because we're definitely going to need your help once again. So there's a town in Northern California that's invited us to bring the windows and install them in their art museum. There's been a lot of like great response to the windows. And, it's really, as you said, Maureen, it's really, hit a nerve. This topic hits a nerve. As Aubrey said earlier, ageism affects everyone throughout their lives. And it's only when we sort of pay attention to how painful it is that we realize we need to end it. And so what we need to do is raise awareness of how it actually is not only painful, but it actually damages people. We know about the, 7.5 years, Becca Levy's research, where she found that people's attitudes towards age when they're younger actually influence how they grow older, how healthy they are as they grow older, how great their incidence of dementia or cardiovascular stress or recovery from illness is over time. So it's not only that we need to raise awareness of like, because it's bad, because it makes us feel bad sort of about our own growing older. It makes our bodies less healthy, just like racism, I must add, and just like sexism.
Yep.
There are similar studies about racism and sexism. So it's really important to make sure that we're looking at ageism as not just, sort of one prejudice, one marginalization, but the intersection is really important.
Exponentially worse, right? When you get those layered in. That's for sure.
Yes.
That's extraordinary, though. So it sounds like this definitely is going to live on in many other ways, which is great.
Yeah.
Do we need to clone these windows? Exactly how much time did it take to put them in place? Like, tell me a little bit about the process of getting these beautiful exhibits together.
It was a long process, Aubrey.
Yeah. I think we worked on it for like 2 years. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So not easy to clone, I'm guessing.
Well, I mean, now that they're done, so our job was putting together, Stacey, the research, and then me kind of trying to translate the concepts into art and then providing those image files. And then Pam, Tina, who was mentioned earlier, she was the sort of guru of like actual fabrication of like, okay, now how do we make them?
Yeah.
Right.
So I don't know about like the files are all there, right? They're JPEGs.
Yeah.
Theoretically, they can be reproduced.
Right.
Posters. You make posters.
Right. Yeah. How do you?
Yeah, we're thinking of that actually.
I think that would be brilliant. I mean, T-shirts, posters. So, do you guys have a favorite panel? Can you pick one?
Ooh. I mean, I have a couple. I do like the one about like women as sort of the social safety net that Stacey mentioned earlier. That's like looks like a stack of dominoes, and each domino is like a different kind of problem, caregiving problem. And then I also like our final window where it's kind of our call to action window about dismantling structural ageism, where we revisit all of these characters and kind of imagining what would it look like if instead of being oppressed, they're fighting back. So what would they be saying? What would they be doing? What would our conversations look like in a world where we're really working together to end ageism? And I think that one works really well.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And one of my favorite, I also love ageism and women's work, which is the dominoes. So the other day, I'm just looking at my phone because I went to the exhibit with Ai-jen Poo, who is an author, activist. She is a MacArthur Genius Award winner. She wrote a book called The Age of Dignity. Her work is supporting caregivers, supporting sort of the care industry. She created the organization Caring Across Generations. She's sort of like the Taylor Swift of caregiving, I call her. So when she came to this window, I was like, Jen, this is like inspired by you. Like, so for me, I have so many associations with a bunch of the windows. That one in particular, I also really love the one about ageism and healthcare. And I love that we made very sort of each of the windows sort of brought up issues where we had to really make decisions about like what ages we were going to include. So, or, sort of at what age would we portray that ageism starts? So in the ageism and healthcare window, the woman who comes to see the doctor is 60 years old. And the doctor sort of in his thought bubble is saying, well, what do you expect? You're not well because you're 60. And we did that on purpose because we wanted to make that like a young enough age that like, that younger people could say, wow, my parents are like over 60, college students, or maybe they're like in their late 50s. Wow, they're old. Or older people to say, wow, only 60 and she's already experiencing ageism. So that, that's sort of relatable. And the other one that, sort of culminated, it feels like a culmination of the work that I've done throughout my career in care management is the one about ageism and long-term care. So where we have the aging industrial complex with all of the sort of fancy goods and services that people can buy if they have enough money, and then the limited resources tree. And we worked long and hard on that. That was actually, incredibly labor intensive because there were so many ideas that we had about, the limited resources tree. How did we want to portray people? We have, an older single, I think she's Latina woman, right? She's a Latina woman, whereas the wealthy couple is like Black and Asian, white and Asian. We have on the limited resources tree a stack of papers that people need to fill out for the limited resources that they can get, like Medicaid. So I worked with people for so many years who had both limited resources and unlimited resources. And, what we portrayed is real. People think they have long-term care through Medicare. People think that they can get help when they're older. But the reality is they cannot through Medicare, and Medicaid is actually really on the chopping block now. So we all really need to fight back around Medicaid and keeping Medicare and the services we do have that really help older people.
Well, again, I can't thank you enough on behalf of literally everyone. As we discussed, this impacts everyone, for doing this installation. And I'm so excited to see where it goes next. Thank you both so much for your work and for doing the show today.
Thanks for the conversation, Maureen.
Yeah, and also thanks for your viral video. That was really wonderful to send around to people when we first came out with the exhibit. So thank you.
It was all you and your work, and I'm so excited that people wanted to talk about it. I think that says everything. So we're ready for this cultural conversation. I think that it's emblematic, the response that you had to the exhibit. So wonderful.
Yeah, let's end ageism.